you're experiencing resistance somewhere, that's that horse telling you he has a lack of understanding. If he's slinging his head to be bridled, if he leans away to be haltered, anywhere you're experiencing resistance, somewhere your horse didn't understand something, and someone forced task completion. He leaned his head away, and they just went, slap that halter on there. He missed the foundational maneuver, which is I need you to hold your head straight down and let me touch you all over. It's kind of like, in philosophy, they say you're doing philosophy whether you know it or not. And so you're training a horse whether you know it or not every time you're around him.
There are healers on this planet with the power to soften the suffering of mankind. Yet they have remained in the recesses of the world, abused, discarded, and labeled as trash. This is The Touch of a Mustang. I am your host, Shalise Clough, and I'm here to tell the story of wild horses, Mustangs, and the humans who are discovering and sharing their gifts while working to protect their well-being and preserve their spirit, so this divine power won't be lost. Join us on this quest with the Wild Mustang. Thank you so much for being here today, Henry. And we are going to chat a lot about horses and Mustangs. So why don't we start with how you have been involved with horses, and that's been a pretty long story, even kind of back into your history.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. As long as I can remember, horses were really a part of my life. My dad was always involved in horse training or doing an agricultural job where horses were involved in some capacity. He trained horses for Harriet Peckham, who's in the Quarter Horse Hall of Fame, and had some pretty big clients as a horse trainer. And he ran ranches and feedlots. And so I had a really unique and cool childhood in which horses were just an everyday part of life. And my uncles and everyone I knew kind of had that same structure to it. And so I grew up with them just being really commonplace, and worked on ranches for my uncles in northern Arizona. Showed horses quite a bit when I was a kid and just had a lot of fun doing that. My dad always had a colt starting business, and so the family chore was starting colts for dad.
Yeah. Were you the first rider? Were you the one he stuck on there? He's like, let's see how you do.
Always.
Yeah.
So grew up starting colts with him, and had a colt starting business out of high school. Post 9/11, I went overseas and did the infantry thing for 6 years or so, and then went to college, got a degree in philosophy, got out, and went back to working on ranches and starting colts. And that kind of led me to working for Martin Black. And then I went through a collegiate horse starting program with his son Wade for a few years, and just went out on my own training horses for the public. And here I am.
So it's always been a part of your life. And I was reading about information on your website that even like your grandfather was involved with horses, and didn't he round up some wild horses when things were way different than now?
Yeah, I could talk about that all day, but my grandfather was what they called a mestignero, or a wild horse gatherer. And so they would spin them in a circle one way and spin them in a circle the other way, which I now understand is so they could see which horse would switch from left eye to right eye pretty easily. Yeah, and so they'd spin them in a circle one way, spin them the other way, and they'd start heading for Fort Apache. As they were heading there, they'd get one out, and they'd put 3 rides on them, and that was considered dead broke for the cavalry.
Yeah. Crazy.
And, yeah. So granddad was into the horse thing too, and it's just always been a part of the kind of familial DNA.
Yeah, that's really cool. Let's talk a little bit about just kind of how horsemanship has changed and transformed. You've been in it a long time, since you were a kid. What changes have you seen? And then also kind of as you got different training, had different experiences, did that change the way that you approached horses and your philosophy with them?
I mean, I think I was really fortunate being around dad. Even in the 90s, dad, I was talking to another friend that trains horses for the public about this.
Mm-hmm.
Dad did what was called natural horsemanship, what we call natural horsemanship now. We kind of loosely know as the Tom Dorrance, Ray Hunt, Martin Black deal. But all my uncles would say, your dad has a different way with horses, because those cowboys did, they'd rope them and snub them up to a post and get on and woohoo buckaroo. That was the old way. And we're not that far removed from that.
Yeah.
to think about that's pretty wild to me that was just not that long ago. I guess maybe I'm dating myself. The 90s doesn't seem like that long ago. But
Doesn't seem that long ago to me either. So
it's 5 years ago, right? Okay.
yeah.
But, so I was really fortunate that dad always had this way with horses, and they were always just held in such esteem in my household. But I got around a lot of other guys, and there was a lot of different ways. And so I have seen it change towards a more kind of ethical, scientific approach. And I think that's awesome. We could talk about this now or later. I think there's some ways where it has almost been hijacked. And I think that there's ways that you could go too far. If there's a virtue in the middle and the vicissitudes are on
Yeah.
either end, I think, I often now see horses that are fairly dangerous just because they've never been pressure tested and they've never been asked to do anything
Yeah.
that grows them and stresses them in a good way. And so as far as seeing it change, I think that's the big change that I've seen is it's moved from an agricultural source of energy to primarily a hobby horse, and there's been some good and bads that's come with that.
Yeah. Yeah, I've noticed the same thing. And I just recently heard someone talk about how, as humans, we tend to overcorrect. It's we see something that's wrong and we think we have to go so far the other way, stay as far away from that wrong as possible. And I think you're right that the correct place to be is in the middle. And I think that's actually also the hardest place to be because you're trying to not go too far either way to where it's detrimental. And so, yeah, I agree. There can be a real danger in going too far the other way. I think we see it all over in our world with horses, with raising kids, where it's just, we want to coddle them. We don't ever want them to hurt. We don't ever want them to be uncomfortable even. And I mean, that's something I've definitely recognized. Like, you have to have an element of discomfort or you're just going to stagnate. You're not going to go anywhere. You'll never be able to progress and gain new skills and succeed in life or horsemanship or any of that. What are some of the things that you've kind of seen related to that?
That's an excellent observation. Well, one thing that I've worked on is that I think Martin Black was an excellent model for me because his motto was that every horse passed this program. And I love that. And I think particularly dealing with Mustangs, you have to treat them that way. If we look at the show world, you take a subset of, let's just say Michael Phelps and Brittany Griner had a baby.
All right.
And then
we'll see where this goes.
And then we kidnapped that baby and we put him on a treadmill when he was 2. And if we blew him up, well, that's all right. Not everyone's going to make it in the NFL, NBA, etc.
Yeah.
And so Martin Black had and I'm not faulting the show world. I actually love to show horses. I think it's great. But Martin's motto was that every horse passed his program. And I think with Mustangs, that's kind of the way you have to treat them. Those are a bunch of individuals. They've been out on the range. They've bred mares. They've fought other stallions. They've been in bachelor herds. They've had babies and progeny. And so they've lived rich and full lives. And so I think it's just better rather than trying to force them in a certain role, a certain category to kind of meet them where they are. And I loved how Martin was able to do that. But within that, I think there should be industry standards. I think you as a psychologist would probably vouch for this. I think resentment is a really powerful emotion. And I don't want to have to do some really crazy technique to halter my horse.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think that the public wants that. I don't think it serves the public or the horse.
Yeah.
And so I just want, if a horse comes to me to be halter started, I want a first-time inexperienced horse owner, after 2 weeks at the most, to be able to walk up there and halter that horse. That's a good industry standard that I think any horse should be able to meet. So within that motto of where's the virtue in between the vicissitudes, I think there is industry standards that ultimately will serve the horse and the owner. And I think we need to stay true to those. And I think if you don't know how to get a horse there, that's okay. You should just be honest with yourself and figure out who you need to get around or what resources you need to divert to doing that,
Yeah, that's probably the hardest thing with horses, right? Is they kind of bring out the places where we need to do work. But as most things in life,
it's a lot easier to blame that on some external force or to blame it on the horse. This horse is difficult, rather than to kind of like look at our skill set, what we're doing, and see, okay, what do I need to do different? What I'm doing is not working. I can
Absolutely.
only control myself. I can't make this horse suddenly be something that's not. But it is a lot easier to just step out and just blame the horse. It was a difficult horse. Get rid of the horse, send it to a trainer, blame the breed, whatever it might be.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great observation. That's so true. I was really fortunate. I was really lucky. I heard Joe Walter say this about when he was around Ray. He said, I was so fortunate because I never had to question the competence of him. And I was around Dad and these phenomenal horsemen from Man from Snowy River guys up in the mountains of northern Arizona.
Mm,
And then I was around Martin and Wade and JR and ton of great horsemen. And I was so blessed that I never had to question their competence or that they knew what they were doing or what they were doing was right.
yeah.
And so it's tricky. It's a tricky thing because we're all apprentices in a craft where no one becomes the master, Hemingway said, and that's the truth.
Yeah. Did you, as you were growing up and learning about horses, did you see that difference? Did you realize like your dad was doing something different than, because for people who may or may not be familiar, there were some pretty intense methods used to quote unquote break a horse in a lot of circles where people were working with horses. Could you tell the difference? Did you
Abs-
see some of that variance where it's like, my dad does this and other people are doing things that are terrifying the horses to get them to do what they would like them to do?
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, I really did. And I was always conscious of that from the time I was a kid on. Yeah, that and I think that was again where I was just so blessed and so fortunate. I didn't do anything to earn that. I won a won the lottery, I guess. And so I look at my life and see how it could have went a lot of different ways. Um, I did see quite a bit of that. I think that there's always the caricature of, the person that is like that, and those people certainly exist. It was a different world where it was an agricultural job, and a
Right.
lot of guys were just trying to get a job done and they didn't have skills. And
Yeah.
I'm not making excuses for them or anything like that. Maybe we could delve into this later, but eventually I studied moral psychology. And so I think that I could have an interesting conversation in the
Yeah.
kind of intersection of how to help people understand those things. But I did see that quite a bit when I was younger. But I think the thing that try to remind people quite a bit about now is that you can abuse a horse the other way too,
Hmm.
and you can create a really dangerous horse. And as we have shifted from agriculture to hobby horses, I see a lot of really dangerous horses frequently. So I think we have to be conscious of that now.
Yeah. And maybe talk a little bit more about that. What are some of the philosophies out there that maybe are not serving the horse as well? And what impact does that have? Because I think, in all honesty, these horses are living in a human world. And so if they can't learn to function with humans, they are at the highest risk of any horses, to end up in a kill pen or rescue or whatnot. So, yeah, what are some of the things you've seen and how that's kind of played out, and maybe recommendations you have for people?
It's a great question. I think it ultimately does go back to that feeling of resentment and fear. And those are not the experiences that I want people to have with horses.
Yeah.
And
What
those are
what do you
not.
mean what do you mean by that? Like resentment and fear?
Well, I think so much of what we've done as cowboys and kind of horsemen is doing a job with a horse together. And there's
Mhm.
something that really comes with that. It's kind of like a guy that doesn't speak English and you don't speak his language, and but you guys live together. And so you go,
Mhm.
we got to put a roof on that barn. And he's like, you go, barn. He's like, barn, perfect. Little bit every day, we get more
Mhm.
and more together. And pretty soon we have this awesome relationship. And so for me, there's a thing that I'm searching for in horsemanship. In the beginning of training that horse, I want to give him cues to kind of regulate his own nervous system, to come down from that sympathetic towards that parasympathetic nervous system, get dopamine and serotonin. And then that way, when he gets bothered, I don't need a bigger aid a bigger, whether it's a spur, a bit, a crop, I can actually give him what he wants, which is relief, dopamine and serotonin, and he'll seek those maneuvers. And so in the beginning of working with a horse, that's what I want him to get from me. And then I want him to eventually start to seek those cues on his own. And so that way, when that bull comes towards you, you can pick up the forequarters and spin your horse and lay your rope on him. And so you have what I've heard called dos es uno, 2 is 1. That for me is where I want a horse to be. What I think you can do going the other way is you can conceptualize, if I make a horse move his feet, I scared him and that's bad. And you can create a ticking time bomb. And as much as the owners frequently don't want to admit it, I think they're scared around their horses quite a bit. They can't lead them anywhere. They're dragging them around. They have a hard
Yeah.
time getting them in a trailer. They have a hard time doing basic industry standard tasks.
Mm-hmm.
And so I know if I went and I needed to put a leppy calf across my saddle and carry him home, and I hadn't worked with my horse enough to where I couldn't ride him with one hand and he wanted to run off back to the barn constantly,
Yeah.
I'd be resentful when I got home a little bit, right?
Yeah.
I'd go, we're not dos es uno. You're actually a
Mm-hmm.
sellout. I'm offering
Yeah.
you a good deal,
Yeah.
and I'm trying to get a good deal back from you, and you're just waiting to sell out and quit me.
Mm.
We don't have a partnership. We don't have a relationship. There's me making you do something.
Mm.
And so that's not the relationship I want people to have with their horses. And that's not the relationship that's ultimately going to serve the horse, who I'm really there for, because that resentment's going to build. You know, if you
Yeah.
had to pay what it costs to feed a horse and upkeep a horse and you couldn't lead him, you're telling me you're not going to come to resent him? Okay. You know,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
for me, that kind of dos es uno, 2 is 1 relationship is what I want everyone to have with their horse. And I want the horse to have ultimately because it serves him.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just think that if you don't start there, if you start with it being this, instead, I'm sure what you experienced in psychology, holding tension, the ability to be assertive, not aggressive, all these things that you work through that are messy with horses, that you
Mm-hmm.
just have to be patient and have some emotional fitness and emotional resilience to work through. If you don't understand that that's what it's going to be, and your conceptualization from some pseudo celebrity has been that it's going to be all cosmic, then I think eventually it's going to become an unsafe situation for you and the horse.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting. And going kind of back to the psychological aspects, there's a quote a saying that I use a lot now, which is choose guilt over resentment. So by nature, I'm kind of a people pleaser. I want things to be okay. I want everyone to be happy, you know? And when you do that, it creates a lot of resentment. But it's interesting that you use that terminology for horses and that it can create resentment, because I think the other side of that is that people are feeling guilty, like I don't want to scare my horse, I don't want to hurt my horse, I don't want them to do something they don't want to do. And so I would almost say that it's a feeling that you are something you need to deal with internally, because there's some emotional attachment that is creating these interactions with your horse where, you know, just say you're coddling him too much so that he's not learning the things that he needs to be a safe, successful member of this world. And I think a lot of that would stem internally where, you know, you're relieving your feelings of guilt that are uncomfortable to have because you don't want to
Mm.
do something to the horse that you perceive in bad light. Like you kind of said, you move the horse's feet and it scares them. And that assumption is like, it's bad for us to be scared. It's bad for us to do things that are uncomfortable. And I think both for horses and for ourselves, like, no, those are the places where it's like we have to like go to those places in order to progress.
Yeah, that's such a great observation. That absolutely, I have so much to say about this. I'll try to keep it succinct, but yeah, that's why through vaquero horsemanship we wear a tie. That's why we have silver bits and silver gear. To me, anyway, it's a proper amount of pride. It's not ego. It's I care about myself. I love myself enough not to let you harm me.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Yeah.
will offer you the best deal. I do this in my business. I will offer you the best deal I can offer you. I promise you I will make it as sweet as I can make it. I'll be as patient as I can, but do not mistake me for a fool. And I think that's You have to have that in any relationship with a horse or with a person. And I think it's actually a deeper love. It might be one of the Greek forms of love. I think what I try to tell that horse is this person, it's not their fault, but for whatever reason, they don't believe in themselves and they don't believe in you.
Mm,
And
yeah.
I really believe in you. I really know what you're capable of. I know that one day you could pack a silver bridle and you could be in the middle of a branding pen with hooky cows and fires. And I know you're a flight animal in a human's world and you're afraid of everything.
Yeah.
But over the course of me working with you, I'm going to teach you to be brave. I'm going to slowly teach you to regulate that nervous system. And the thing that you're going to come out being on the other side is crazier than, you sitting in the basement and being 40 years old and still playing World of Warcraft because,
Yeah.
and I actually believe in you. And I know you don't believe in yourself yet. And so that's kind of the way I conceptualize that. Like a horse is meant to move his feet. He gets relief from moving his feet actually because he's a flight animal.
Yeah.
And so we can really use that to create a brave horse, and I believe in every horse that way. I've never seen one yet that was too far gone or anything that he couldn't come back from it and he couldn't come out something that he was a lot. I know quite a bit about the neuroscience behind horses. I know that I'm anthropomorphizing them, but you'll see those bridle horses proud when they're packing a silver bridle and they're bridled up and they're brave. They're proud. I don't know if that's the
Yeah.
right word, but to me, they're proud. And so I try to tell those horses, look, right now I'm your only friend in the world. I don't need anything from you, but I'm going to teach you to be brave. And so that's the relationship I want to have with them. But yeah, that's an interesting topic and we could talk quite
Yeah.
a bit about. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's definitely a thing in our culture that people are struggling with a lot is kind of that fear and that bravery and having the balance between, like you say, sitting in your basement, watching TV your whole life versus going and doing those things that you have more potential for. Kind of same thing with the horse, right? They can just sit out in a pasture or in a corral and eat and they will live that way. But how much are we undermining that potential because we're not willing to have a little bit of bravery? And I think a lot of that goes back to a lot of those things that are projected onto the horse, like we often hear, they are incredible mirrors. And so, yeah, if we are fearful so much, most likely that's kind of how we're living life. And that's kind of how we're facing our own world that we're then putting over to the horse. So, of course, he's terrified because he's like, you're scared of everything. I definitely experienced that a little bit with my first Mustang. I was like, oh my gosh, I just had so much personal insight about how afraid I am and things in life. Yeah. Talk to us a little bit more about the Vaquero. Did I even say that right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Kind of the principles and the approaches that they use, because I know that's a big thing that you rely on.
Yeah. So there's again, like with the natural horsemanship, there's nobody that really has a claim to what we're doing, and what we're doing is not all the same thing. They kind of look the same sometimes and are cousins, but everybody's got their own flavor, Dr. Pepper, whatever. So, but the main thing about vaquero horsemanship is everything we do relies on a signal. And so, like those hackamores, we start out in a 3/4 hackamore. The bozal hackamore is just Spanish for halter. And so I could go into the Spanish traditions and what great horsemen they are and how that came from the Moors out of Spain. But they were some of the greatest horsemen of all time, cavalrymen, and everything we do relies on a signal. We don't use any leverage devices. So like a snaffle obviously is a 1-to-1 pull, and then you have leverage bits, etc. But that hackamore is just a halter, and a horse could jerk it out of your hand anytime he wants. He could get hard to it. He could run off. It's a bluff. It's an illusion of control. So what we have to do is teach that horse to want to do the maneuvers that we want him to do in just a rawhide halter. And the way to do that is to kind of use some principles of natural horsemanship, which came from vaquero horsemanship. It really
Yeah.
was the same thing.
I find it so interesting because it's like we think we discover stuff and it's like you go back and look, it's like, people were already there a while ago.
Sure, there was a canon for sure. There is a canon for horsemanship, and in kind of the age of the clinician pseudo celebrity, I think some people are really good at getting that to the public and rebranding it, remarketing that, and that's fine. That's good. The more people that know it, the better.
Yeah.
But kind of like karate, it got watered down a little bit. You know what I mean? And so, but in these signal devices, you're gonna need a horse to seek that dopamine and serotonin and want to do those maneuvers. So for me, I know the horse is a flight animal. I know he's afraid of everything. The greatest relief I can give him is not a treat. It's not a punishment. It's relief from fear. And so if I can use some field timing and balance and have some good groundwork going, and I can get him to stop and lick his lips and come back down from that sympathetic nervous system to that parasympathetic nervous system, when I cue him with a rein and that rein is tied to that foot, he'll want to do that. And then later on, I can pick up his feet and move them like they're my own. Say I'm on the side of a mountain and it's pretty hairy and there's some cows going by me and I need to take just one step, not two steps, just one. I can pick up his feet and move them like they're my own. And so the only way you can do that is by training their nervous system, because we just use this device as a signal. We have no
Mm-hmm.
leverage over them. We can't tie their heads down and get bigger, stronger, any of that. It has to just be reliant on them being a partner and them following a signal. And then later on, it ends up in a spade bit, which is a signal device. You know, it's the old vaqueros would tie a piece of horsehair in their rein chains, and you'd ride your circle. And if you broke, well, maybe a couple pieces of horsehair, but if
Yeah.
you broke those, if you broke those pieces because you got too heavy with your hands, that was too much signal.
Mm.
And so, anyway, the point of that is vaquero horsemanship largely relies on signal. And so I prefer it. It's not the quickest way to get a horse in the show pen. There's a lot of disadvantages to it. You know, it's not for experienced riders. What I've tried to do is, and I think a lot of guys have tried to do, is add some snaffle bit stuff in there and get it to where it's more accessible to the general public.
Yeah.
Because if you pull on that hackamore instead of bumping, and that horse learns to pull back once, well, that's it. You're never going to be able to ride him in a hackamore again. And so that's kind of some of the principles of it. It relies on signal and kind of and regulating that nervous system and teaching them to seek that dopamine and serotonin.
Yeah, that's interesting. I like that way you distinguish that, because a lot of us learn, or in a lot of circles, it is kind of an element of control. Like, you got to control your horse. You need to be in control. You know, in the show ring, they won't let you ride in some areas without bridles because you have to have that control. So I like that the place you put it is, it's like a communication device, is what I'm understanding. It's a way that you guys are talking to each other to understand what the other being wants. And it's interesting because, like you said, you know, if you pull too hard against the hackamore, the horse is going to be jerking its head. It's like, well, you communicated something. It just wasn't what you probably wanted to communicate. It probably is not going to go the way you want. But maybe talk a little bit more about that, and maybe also related to fear, because I think fear and control are very closely related. We kind of seek control because we fear. So yeah, maybe talk a little bit about control, and if you have thoughts on it, how that's related to fear. Because from my experience, from what I've seen with other people, and even in our life, not just horsemanship, a lot of times we want control so badly because we are afraid. And we kind of see that with things that happen in the world, you know, with COVID and things where we're so fearful that it's like we need so much control to ensure something doesn't happen that we don't want to happen. When, I mean, let's be honest, the reality is stuff's gonna happen that we don't want to happen. We can't always control it. So do you have anything to add about those relationship between those two?
Yeah, I think, you know, fear does somewhat stem from a lack of understanding. And if you understand those horses pretty well, there's not a lot of reason to fear them. They're
Mm.
big, you know, they're big flight animals for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And they have, you know, driving factors, what my old college professor called driving factors. They're a herbivore. They're going to seek comfort and companionship. They want to go. I think it's ultimately how you conceptualize that. And I think that's a little bit where some kind of clinicians have done the whole industry a disservice, is conceptualize it is a relationship, but not in a transactional way. It's more like a relationship between you and a kid. A friend of mine asked me about this. He said his kid stole. I said, "Well, how's the kid?" Like 6 or 7, and I'm like, "What? That's what kids do. They take stuff they want."
Yeah.
There's no reason to be mad about that. You just got to kind of slowly school them into that. That's not what we do. And so I think if you understand that horse, there's no reason to fear him. If you understand what he's going to do. There was an old mentor of mine that said, "Are we influencing the soul, or are we forcing the body?" And you can frame a horse up. You can tie his head down. You can tie his mouth shut, bigger bit, bigger spur, bigger crop, and then frame him up really nice. But that's why we used to value riding a horse with one hand. That's why we thought that was worth showing. Because in the old vaquero tradition, in the old conquistador tradition, if you had a battle horse you could ride with one hand that was really with you, or rope a cow with the riata, that was worth showing off because that horse was really with you. And so I think a lot of those things with the fear, it comes from times that we wouldn't be truthful with ourselves and say, "I'm afraid and I need some skills. I need some understanding. I need some conceptualization to know what to do with this." There were so many times I've climbed on hundreds and hundreds of horses. I was afraid when I was a little guy with my dad.
Yeah.
Throw you up there, and it's like, "Hold on the saddle horn," right? And
bet.
I had to face that. I had to face a lot of the fear that I had in my own self coming out of the service or whatever. And yeah, I'm rambling here and not quite threading the through line, I suppose. But I just think a lot of that fear and wanting to control that horse comes from a lack of understanding of him and a lack of tools. And then seeing the horse in not a particularly healthy framework of understanding that horse is just a horse. He just wants what he wants. And seeing each horse as a sentient being and an individual.
Yeah.
That was one thing that I learned from some of those guys was they just go, "Yeah, you can make a really nice horse for the price of a hospital bill." So if that horse wants to buck really bad, respect him, and he can go be a bucking horse. He can go. There are 1 in 10,000 horses that it's like, well, that seems to be what he wants to do. And so I have something akin to like a big 5 personality traits for horses that I can kind of read in them. And there's some horses, like I'm sure if you're a psychologist, you go low in empathy, really disagreeable. It's like you start getting to that level where it's like, I'm not going to say that person's a psychopath, but it's like that's a tough character, and maybe this is not the right role for him to be grandma's trail horse.
Yeah, right.
So when you can read horses like that and you have that relationship to them, I think there's a lot less reason to be afraid of them.
Yeah. I think that is true that a lot of times we dismiss their personality, that these horses are different, and it's crazy how different they can be. You can be with one horse trying to do something and their reaction is going to be completely different from another horse because of their personality and the way they are. And I think a lot of times we kind of take that out of the equation. We just focus on like, I want to do X, Y, and Z. How is that going to happen? And if I can't do it, then where do we go?
Absolutely. Yeah. And you need to have a program where every horse can pass it, no matter where he is on that spectrum. And then every once in a blue moon, you have an outlier that you go, it's not that we couldn't do this. It's that the amount of time and money is not going to work. And so maybe this horse needs to go to a button string. Maybe that's just what there's some guys that need to go to the UFC because if you tried to give them a job at Walmart, they'd be pretty unhappy and everybody around them would be pretty unhappy.
Yeah, that's a good point. What was I just going to ask you? You said something.
Probably too much.
No. It's great. That's what we're here for, is to talk.
Okay.
That's what this is all about. No, I was going to ask you, what are some of the things you said, and you mentioned it a few times, like every horse should be able to pass the program. What are some things that informs programs like that differently, where you are, working for the horse to be successful?
Could you kind of reformulate the beginning of the question a little bit so I understand a little bit more? I'm sorry.
Yeah, just like what are some of the differences or what are some of the different strategies that would be used in a program like that, where it's like, the goal is for the horse to succeed?
Yeah. I think part of what I learned from Wade Black was having kind of measurable quantitative and qualitative goals for a horse. With horses, as you know, you have to meet them where they are every day. So if I go out and I want to work on my spins or my slides or my stops today, and my horse is throwing his head when I go to bridle him, I'm going to stop right there. And Wade would say task completion is a temperament and foundation. So if the temperament's not right, if that horse is running around crazy, I might do some groundwork with him first until I decrease some of that excess energy that's fueling self-preservation. So then the temperament's right. I need some foundation. I need to be able to touch him all over his nose. I need to be able to touch him on his ears. I need to be able to touch him a few times with that bridle. I need to be able to stick my finger in his mouth and have him break his jaw, get some dopamine and serotonin, and me give him relief. When I've got the temperament right, when he has the foundation, the task completion will come. And so much of our troubles with horses is when we start with task completion. And we go out there and say, this is what I'm going to do with this horse today. This is where he's at, and this is what I'm going to do. And there's no communication, and there's no checking in where the horse is in his understanding and conceptualization. So I want to have a program that's structured like that. That being said, we need some goals.
Yeah.
You know,
it's that balance.
It's that balance.
It's the tricky part of life.
It is.
And horsemanship.
It is. And so I want to have a program to where that horse has ample amount of time to be able to meet all those goals that I have for him in the first 90 days, the first 120 days. And I have a list of things that I send to clients. This is what your horse will be able to do after 120 days, basic reining pattern, loading a trailer, stand for a rider, etc. But I think that's the way you want to structure those things. But I also have something similar to a report card where I can say, your horse can't do these things, and this is why. This is where he's at, and this is the tutoring that he needs to get up to speed.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a good recipe for a good program, is to annotate those things and know where that horse is at every day and just meet him where he's at. And he's going to get as far as he's going to get.
Yeah. A few things. Talk to us a little bit more about like timelines and the timelines we have with horses. You mentioned a few times just, you give them the time that they need. It's kind of a tricky topic because, people send their horses away to a trainer for 30 days and have these expectations when they come back. And like you kind of pointed out, like sometimes that's just not always going to be possible to do with a good foundation. A lot of times a trainer can get those things done, but not necessarily something that's going to be lasting.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot to be said there. I think that ultimately the dollar is what drives everything. And we have to be cognizant of that. And it's really unfortunate. And I've tried to structure my life to where I don't have to operate like that. We talked a little bit about abuse earlier, kind of how that looked back in the day when I was younger. A lot of times what they don't tell you now, though, is you send your horse to a guy like me and I tell you it's going to take X amount of time and this is what it's going to cost. Yeah, there's a guy out there that I promise you will tell you he's a horse whisperer and he can get your horse there quick. And he will take your money. And it's usually the client driving a lot of this abuse because they want to show their horse, right? They want the bottom dollar. They want to show theur horse. And then they turn around and go, why is there all these abusive horse trainers? Well, because you fired everyone that told you the truth.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I think that's a good point. Like, let's be realistic because, why are there 30-day trainers out there? Because that's what horse owners want. They want a horse that they can send away and come back and have things the way that they would like them.
Exactly. And so I'm trying to find that virtue where I'm kind of in the middle of going, hey, I respect your time and your money. And I want this horse to be where he can be. I want to say that I'm skilled enough I can get this horse where he needs to be as maximally efficient as possible. But ultimately, there's no amount of money you could ever pay me to sacrifice my relationship to that horse. Each horse that I work with, it's a sacred relationship to me. Another reason why you wear a tie and you have a silver bit was to kind of respect the sacredness of what you're doing every time you step into a round crawling arena with that horse, to remind yourself that this is serious business. This is a sentient being's life in your hands. So pay attention, Jack. So ultimately, a lot of times it's the people that claim that they want ethical horsemanship the most are the quickest to go, well, also I got a bottom dollar, and I'm going to send it to this guy who tells me he's a horse whisperer and does natural horsemanship just like you, but he ties his head down and does all kinds of stuff to him, frames him up real quick and sends him back. And so I think having a realistic timeline, like I won't take a horse for less than 90 days or 120 days. And I think that's a safe amount of time. You should be able to get quite a bit done during that time. And yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with timelines. And again, in the vaquero style of horsemanship, it takes 8 years to make a bridle horse.
I believe that.
Yeah.
That's been my experience.
And so it's really funny because the industry usually works the way that it works for a reason.
Yeah.
A nice horse costs a lot of money because he was at a trainer for a long time.
Yeah. And the other ones are meeting a demand that's out there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. How important, like when you work with a horse, how important is the owner in that process, or the person it's ultimately going back to?
It's crucial. It's crucial. Quite a lot of what I do is client education. Back to that unsafe horse. You sat on that horse bareback for 30 days, and then you could ride him around an arena in a snaffle bit. And I can ride him around the arena in a snaffle bit. Maybe the owner can't tell the difference. And so I need to say, well, I've taken your horse out and I've rode him down the road. I've done the X with him. I need that client to understand the difference in what I do and what other people do for it to have any value to them. Otherwise, they can't see the difference. And I need that client and that horse to be able to fill in for each other because I need it to be a good deal for them, ultimately. And so the client's everything. The client is everything. So much of what I struggled with as a young, I hate being called a horse trainer. I don't like training horses, but it's the best word. But as a young horse trainer, was weeding out clients who were just going to be tough. It was going to be a bad deal for me. It was going to be a bad deal for the horse. And I hate to say that, but when I was in college, they taught us that, I don't know if this statistic holds, that in the horse industry, 85 to 90% of the people are horse owners, and then the other percentage is professionals in the industry. And the average horse owner is a first-time horse owner. He's owned a horse for 5 years, and he owns 2 to 3 horses. And so what you have is a large amount of the people out there driving the industry may not have the skills or even basic folk ways or mores. You know, they can't tell the difference between a guy that's trained horses his whole life and a guy that's kind of a pseudo-celebrity clinician, and they need help. And so however willing they are to accept help is ultimately how successful you're going to be with them.
Yeah. Going back to what you kind of talked about, how you have to meet the horse where it's at. And you talked about if you put the bridle on, the horse starts shaking its head. Like you need to start somewhere besides putting the bridle on.
Sure.
What are some things that like you would recommend people doing to, I think really what it is, like listening to your horse better, to be able to kind of identify that and listen to your horse better so you can, accomplish the things you want to and be successful in, the goals that you have?
It's a great question. I mean, I'm sure you've experienced this. That horse will tell you where he's at. If you're experiencing...
They absolutely do. People listening is another issue, but
if you're experiencing resistance somewhere, then that's that horse telling you there's a lack of understanding. If he's slinging his head to be bridled, if, he leans away to be haltered, anywhere you're experiencing resistance, somewhere your horse didn't understand something and someone forced task completion. He leaned his head away and they just went, slap that halter on there. He missed the foundational maneuver, which is I need you to hold your head straight down and let me touch you all over. And so I'm always looking for, it's kind of like, in philosophy, they say you're doing philosophy whether you know it or not. And so you're training a horse whether you know it or not every time you're around him. And I'm always looking for those little signs, tighten the lips, watching their nose, their breathing rate, all the physiological things that we talk about to see where that horse is at and what part he's not understanding of this. And if he comes back down and unclenches that jaw and goes back into that sympathetic nervous system, I know he learned something, whether it's something good or something bad. It's ultimately up to me,
Yeah. How do you kind of distinguish between like this is a place where the horse is either reaching its threshold or you're advancing too fast, versus like this is a place where we're going out of your comfort zone. We're pushing you a little past where you're comfortable so that you can learn. How do you find that balance between not, I guess, not being too soft, not being too hard, kind of finding that middle place where it's like a good place for the horse to be learning and to be gaining that understanding?
Wade would say there's the science, the art, and the business.
Mm-hmm.
You need all three of those things.
Yeah.
And so that's the art. That's the art of horsemanship for sure. And you got to just thousands of horses, and you have to get around the right people.
Yeah.
Martin Black could get done in 3 days what I could get done in a month.
Mm-hmm.
Because his ability to read that horse and his field timing and balance was so impeccable. He knew when they were right at the top, getting close to that sympathetic nervous system, and there was quite a bit of stress going on there.
Yeah.
And then he'd drop them back down, give them some understanding. They'd lick their lips and kind of program that. And
realize they're okay. I survived.
Yep. And then he'd take them back up, back down, and he'd do it so well that it was just it was art, and it's the art that I practice every day.
Yeah.
And there's some guys that are really, really, really good at it. So that's kind of an abstract answer, but
yeah,
I'm always watching for those physiological signs. Obviously, I'm making sure there's plenty of dwell time, making sure I see them lick their lips, and what we call lick their lips, which is really just they clench their jaw, get that dopamine, serotonin, come back down towards that parasympathetic nervous system. But I'm always watching all of that. You almost can't go slow enough sometimes.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean not stress them, but that means wait for dwell time long enough.
Yeah.
Whatever it took you, like if it took you 30 seconds of just holding tension with your flag, I'd triple that. I'd wait a minute and 30 seconds. I'd wait 2 minutes, 5 minutes maybe for them to lick their lips. I'd be surprised. I've never been surprised how many times they might go and lick their lips again. And they might do that 2-3 times if you'll wait long enough. I've waited a long time, and it seems like you're going slow then, but it's actually maximally efficient. Because if I'll school a horse that way, and it'll take me 5 minutes to get some basic task done, putting a halter on him, when I go to put it on him tomorrow, he'll really have it. Versus I had to school on him tomorrow and the next day, and eventually he gets it. But so you just about can't wait on him long enough.
Yeah.
If any of that helps.
Yeah, no, I think it does a lot. One, there is no replacement for time and being willing to learn from the horse. I think something, if you're going to succeed with your horse, you definitely have to have. And then I think the other piece is it's really tricky because we live in this world that's like, go, 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 do, and when you enter the world with horses, it's almost the opposite, like stop, wait, slow down, like you said, more than you think you should be slowing down. So that's really interesting. I think it's good principles to be mindful of when you're working with the horse, that our world is much different than theirs, so we're going in from a very different perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great observation. It's the best feeling to just be in a round crowd with one and shut out the world, and it really can be art to you.
Yeah.
If you just try to make it the best experience you can for the horse and the best experience you can for yourself. And that's where I think the message of that it is a relationship is true. Yeah. Some of that got lost when people thought it meant there was a transactional relationship. Like if I do this, you'll do that type deal. The horse doesn't understand that at all. But it's a different kind of relationship. But you're right. It's the most mindful. It's a deep pool. The deeper you go, the deeper it gets. I don't know that there's a bottom to it, and I don't know where I'm at, but it's cool.
Yeah. Well, and I like that you refer to it as the art of horsemanship, because when we think of art, you're going off how things feel and creating, what feels right. And I think, some of that goes back to our intuition. If we'll like slow down enough to like listen and observe and then kind of see what we're getting, how to react, then yeah, that's cool. I like that imagery, that it's an art.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I read Rick Rubin's book, and it really influenced me. And I think there has to be a sense of play for sure. It has to be a playful relationship, and it has to be something you're not doing for the consumer. You
Mm.
don't make art with the consumer in mind. You make
Mm-hmm.
art for the sake of making art. And so
Yeah.
hopefully the consumer's turned on to that later and they like
Yeah.
the product you've made. But
Yeah.
that's what it is. It's a little piece of art, each horse.
Yeah. I love that you added play in there because how often are we like, we go out to be with our horse. It's something we enjoy. And then we're like, I'm going to go on a ride today. And it doesn't work out. And so it turns into something that's not fun and not enjoyable for anyone in the thing. Where here, most people that have horses, it's because they really love them. And there's something that just draws them to them. But how easily we can lose that if we're too focused on our goals.
That's a great observation. Yep, 100%.
Yeah. Yeah, so let's talk about Mustangs. How did you become involved with Mustangs and what are some of your experiences there and what are you doing now with that?
Yeah, so I've worked with quite a few over the years, but I'd never taken one from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So I was relatively confident going into this, thinking, how many ranch horses have I halter started?
Yeah.
They've been turned out on a ranch for 3 years with the broodmare band. How
Yeah.
different could it be?
Right?
Pretty different.
Yeah.
Pretty different.
Yeah.
So I had originally kind of wanted to do this Mustang nonprofit myself, but I was trying to make a living schooling horses
Yeah.
for the public, and so a mutual friend put me in contact with a friend of hers there, and so she said she was going to start a nonprofit and that I might be a good fit. I was pretty skeptical. As a horse trainer, it's not always beneficial to go put all your eggs in one basket with a client, and then you're kind of at the mercy of their whims.
Yeah.
So I thought, thanks, but no thanks. But this mutual friend told me, well, this lady is kind of really cool lady. She's works in marketing for the Walt Disney Company, and she listens. She's a really smart lady and a great leader, and she listens and will take feedback. And so I thought, well, it's okay. So we kind of started emailing, and I thought, well, I'll just be useful to her because it's a good thing to be useful.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought I'll make myself as useful to her as I can. I'll kind of answer her emails, but as I did, I just became more and more sympathetic to what she was trying to do in kind of this sometimes callous transactional world. Thought this is really cool that this lady's doing this, and I want to help her as much as possible. So I thought, I think I might take the job. And she came out. Our two board members, Lori Ann and Sumi, came out to see me here in Eastern Oregon, and I was just so impressed with both of them. Lorianne was just this kind of super light, full, funny, pithy woman. To know her is to love her. She's like an
Mm-hmm.
alchemist. She turns everything into light and fun. Sense of humor was super sharp, and she just tied me up like a pretzel so quick I couldn't joke back with her. I was, and then Sumi Chang, who's our founder, was just this incredible woman. I'd never felt more seen by a person.
Mm.
I wasn't sure how. It was kind of like being with a horse. One of the things that I had struggled with in the business part of this horse schooling or horse training was that I would offer people the best deal I could offer them. And a lot of times they would mistake that and they would take that for granted. And then later on they go, oh, wow, you're really offering me a good deal, weren't you? And I go, yeah,
Yeah.
sorry. And I could tell right away she understood that about me. So here they were in Eastern Oregon, one lady from Los Angeles, the other from Oklahoma, and they're like out here to see if I'm the guy. You know, and they kind of had this look like, we're doing this with or without you.
Yeah.
And I just felt so moved and compelled to come work for them, and kind of what you and I talked about. I know a lot of insider baseball from being in the horse industry for a long time and kind of have a good feel for how things work, I think. And I just felt overwhelmed to help them in this cause. So yeah, I decided I'm going to go partner with the American Mustang Project and start helping them hopefully do something about this Mustang situation.
Yeah. And so tell us a little bit more about that organization and what they're working towards and how they're doing that.
Yeah, so our founder, this kind of, I think she's a really special person, this kind of really visionary person. And so I don't have all the details of where it's going to go. Ultimately, I don't want to speak for them.
Yeah.
Because I think it's going to go a lot of directions. I think it's going to be really cool. As far as my role in it and what I know we're wanting to do is take some of these Mustangs in holding and do what you and I just talked about. What we do in the Great Basin is we're not always known for being Grand Prix dressage riders. We're not known for a lot of things, but what we're known for, Buck Brannaman, Martin Black, Joe Walter, Brian Newport, Ray Hunt, Tom Dorrance, is putting a really good foundation on a horse. A really good 120 days. We do it as good as anybody in the world, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying I'm up there with those guys, but I'm trying to do and have tried to do and hopefully semi-successfully done what they've done over the years. And so we're trying to take these Mustangs and put a solid foundation on them so that they are of value to the consumer, and the consumer can take them in any direction that they want and have a lifetime partnership with this horse. And so we're trying to do that for, I think, as many as we can. We broke ground on a facility in Missouri, kind of our flagship facility, this last fall of October and November. And we have our first horse adopted out to our good friend from Saddles and Service, Tammy Olevic, a veterans organization. We took Rihanna our first 6'5", 8'3", I believe, and put a solid foundation on her, and she went to a great home. She's been placed, and we have 6818 Rex, our next horse, coming through, and so we're kind of rocking and rolling in the infancy, but really excited to see where it goes.
Yeah, that is cool. I think it's so important to realize when we can do that for the horses, that's when they start to have value in our world, because, you know, like we all know, there are so many of them, and of course they're beautiful in the wild, but we also live in reality where that's, you know, everything's not always ideal. So yeah, being able for these horses to have that foundation where someone will value them and take them into their home and enjoy life with them is just a really cool, really beautiful thing. So what differences have you seen since you've been working with Mustangs between the domestic horses and even the free roaming ranch horses?
Those are kind of paltry things. I'm not the best speaker. I'm a little bit of an introvert, so I'm a better writer. There really is something I saw in one of your posts, and I commented on it a while back, that there's nothing quite like that feeling with those Mustangs when they turn that corner and start to want to get with you and want to be with you. I don't know if you're familiar with Tom Hagwood. I don't want to speak on Tom's behalf, and I don't know enough about him to really speak super broadly. Tom, I know, won some stuff in the reined cow horse for the reining and was really good in the show world. But now, for the last, I don't know how long, 30 years maybe, he's done nothing but Mustangs.
Really? I have not even heard his name before.
Yeah, a lot of people haven't. He's not a big self-promoter kind of clinic guy. He's just kind of does his thing with training horses. And but I always wondered, why didn't Tom continue in the reined cow horse?
Yeah.
I wasn't really sure. And when I did Rieta, the first Mustang, I understood.
Yeah.
I understood.
Yeah.
And, so it's just been different. They take a lot of dwell time. They're pretty high in self-preservation initially. But yeah, when they do turn that corner, it's a different feeling. I'm sure as you've experienced.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I agree. It's hard to explain what exactly happens with them. I'm like, I don't know if I even know. Like, why I was just around this horse and now I feel differently. I'm not sure what happened, but yeah, they are very cool. As we wrap up, why don't you tell people where they can find you, all that good stuff.
Yeah, so I have my website, Henry Merrill Horsemanship, and I'm the Henry Merrill on Instagram, because apparently there's a lot of other Henry Merrills out there. I couldn't just get
Henry you got to get nice.
And then you can find the American Mustang Project online at their website. They have Instagram as well.
To end with, is there a horse that stands out in your life or a lesson that you've learned from your work and time with horses that has kind of been significant or changing for you?
I think right now, definitely the first Mustang we had, Rieta, reminded me. I had come from that natural horsemanship background and had been in the show world and kind of got in the habit of wondering how quick I could get a horse there, and she just reminded me so much to slow down, and that she is a sentient being with her own experiences and her whole own internal world. And I'm really grateful for that. I'm really grateful for her for that. She'll always hold a special place in my heart for kind of bringing me back to my roots.
Mustangs are pretty awesome. Thank you so much for being here. I think the work that you're doing is incredible, and I'm so glad we've won you over to the Mustang world. I'm glad those ladies were pretty persistent in getting you to Yeah, getting you in here. So I think that's exactly what it needs, is just people who are really wanting to learn and do things the right way, and then to share that with other people, and to benefit the world around us through that. And so thank you so much for coming on here. I thought our discussion was great. So many cool ideas that you shared and approaches that you take with the horses. And I appreciate that.
But thank you so much for having me, and thank you for everything you do, and yeah, being a part of this collectively, being a part of this bigger solution to this situation. So thank you so much. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you for joining us in learning about horses that heal and the humans who help them. We hope you'll continue with us on this journey. We'd love for you to subscribe on your favorite platform and follow The Touch of a Mustang on any of the major social media outlets. Please share with your friends, anyone who loves horses, or anyone who might be struggling and could benefit from this message. If you have felt the healing power of horses or help them in their divinely appointed mission, please reach out. We want to hear your story. As we say goodbye, always remember that the horse is always there to help you heal.